Legal. The content presented in this video series is strictly for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute financial, investment, tax, or legal advice. The strategies, concepts, and numerical examples discussed are based on historical data, theoretical modeling, and personal interpretations of economic principles, none of which guarantee future results. Investing in financial markets involves a significant degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Every individual's financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term goals are unique. Before making any financial decisions, modifying your investment portfolio, or altering your retirement planning strategy, you are strongly advised to consult with a qualified, licensed financial advisor, certified public accountant, or tax professional who can assess your specific circumstances. The creators of this content assume no responsibility or liability for any errors, omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. You are solely responsible for your own due diligence. There is a silent crisis happening in living rooms across the United States right now. It is not the crisis you see on the evening news, and it is not the one politicians are debating on Capitol Hill. It is the crisis of the deferred life. Consider the standard American script we have all been handed since kindergarten. You go to school for 18 years. You take on tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt to get a degree that may or may not be relevant to your career. You land a job at 22. You work 40, 50, or 60 hours a week. You buy a house with a 30-year mortgage. You upgrade your car every 5 years. You struggle to save 10% of your income. And you wait. You wait for the magical age of 65, the golden finish line where you are finally allowed to own your time. But here is the controversial truth that the financial industry and the traditional labor market do not want you to analyze too closely. The math behind that standard script is broken. It was designed for an economy that died in 1980. Look at the data. A recent study by the Federal Reserve indicated that a significant portion of American adults would struggle to cover a $400 emergency expense with cash. We are seeing a reality where the cost of living, housing, healthcare, and education has outpaced wage growth for decades. The promise was that if you worked hard and played by the rules, you would be taken care of in your twilight years. But historical trends and current pension shortfalls suggest that relying solely on Social Security or a meager 401k contribution is a strategy fraught with peril. If you follow the herd, the statistics suggest you will likely work until you are physically unable to, or you will retire with a lifestyle drastically reduced from what you enjoyed during your working years. We are seeing case studies of individuals in their 70s greeting customers at retail stores not because they want to stay active, but because they cannot afford the electricity bill without that paycheck. This is the open loop of modern existence. Working to pay for a life you are too busy working to enjoy. But what if that entire premise is wrong? What if the timeline is flexible? There is a growing subculture in America that has rejected this 40-year sentence. They are not lottery winners. They are not trust fund babies. They are not tech billionaires who got lucky on an IPO. They are teachers, engineers, project managers, and nurses who have cracked the code of capital efficiency. They are retiring at 35, 40, or 45. They are traveling the world, raising their children without the stress of a commute, and pursuing passion projects without worrying about monetization. This is the FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early. And if you are watching this, you likely feel a gnawing suspicion that there has to be a better way to navigate the game of money. You are right. There is. Welcome to the Deep Dive Masterclass. Over the next 10 parts, we are going to dismantle your understanding of personal finance and rebuild it from the ground up. This is not a quick tips video. We are not going to give you generic advice like stop buying coffee or make a budget, because those surface-level tactics are insufficient for the magnitude of the goal we are chasing. We are chasing total sovereignty over your time. The promise of this series is simple but profound. We are going to provide you with a comprehensive operating system to potentially exit the rat race decades ahead of schedule. We are going to move beyond the vague idea of saving money and delve into the aggressive mathematics of wealth accumulation. You need to understand that FIRE is not just about money. It is a philosophical restructuring of what a successful life looks like. In this masterclass, we will explore the mechanics of the savings rate, which is the single most important metric in your financial life, more important than your investment returns and more important than your salary. We will mathematically prove why increasing your savings rate from 10% to 50% does not just double your speed to retirement. It accelerates it exponentially, shaving decades off your mandatory working life. We will tackle the 4% rule, or the safe withdrawal rate, examining its origins in the Trinity study. We will look at the historical data of market cycles to understand how a portfolio of low-cost index funds can theoretically sustain you for 40 or 50 years without you ever earning another active paycheck. We will look at the critics of this rule and adjust the strategy for the modern era of lower projected bond yields and higher inflation volatility. But we will go deeper than just the numbers. We will discuss the psychological rewiring required to exist in a consumerist society without being consumed by it. The American economy is an engine designed to separate you from your capital. Every advertisement, every algorithm, and every social pressure is optimized to make you spend today at the expense of your freedom tomorrow. We will analyze the concept of hedonic adaptation, the tendency for humans to quickly return to a relatively stable level of happiness despite major positive or negative events or life changes, and how mastering this psychological quirk is the key to spending less without feeling deprived. We will break down the different flavors of FIRE, because this is not a one-size-fits-all ideology. We will explore lean FIRE, for the minimalists who want to exit the system as fast as possible on a bare-bones budget. We will look at fat FIRE, for high earners who want to retire with a luxury lifestyle and a massive safety margin. We will discuss barista FIRE or coast FIRE, hybrid approaches where you front-load your investments in your 20s and 30s, so you can switch to low-stress part-time work that covers your expenses while your nest egg compounds in the background. We will also address the elephant in the room: health insurance in the United States. This is the number one reason people are afraid to leave their corporate jobs. We will walk through the Affordable Care Act, health-sharing ministries, and the strategies early retirees use to ensure one medical emergency does not wipe out their net worth. We will analyze the tax code. The United States government offers powerful incentives for saving, but they are often misunderstood. We will explain the Roth conversion ladder, a complex but legal strategy that allows early retirees to access their retirement accounts penalty-free long before the standard age of 59 and a half. We will look at the difference between tax-deferred and tax-exempt growth and how to structure your asset location to minimize the drag of taxes on your compounding curve. This is not about deprivation. It is about intention. It is about realizing that every dollar you spend is a vote. You can vote for immediate gratification, or you can vote for your future freedom. When you start to view money not as a tool to buy things but as a tool to buy time, your entire paradigm shifts. A new car is not just a monthly payment. It is 3 years of freedom burned. A larger house is not just a status symbol. It is 5 more years shackled to a desk you hate. The stakes could not be higher. We are living through a period of economic uncertainty. The traditional safety nets are fraying. The social contract is changing. Those who depend entirely on a paycheck are vulnerable. Those who build a fortress of assets are resilient. By the end of this 10-part series, you will no longer look at a spreadsheet as a chore. You will see it as a map. You will have the vocabulary to understand market volatility not as a threat, but as the price of admission for wealth creation. You will understand the distinction between being rich, having a high income, and being wealthy, having time freedom. This is a journey from dependency to independence. It requires discipline. It requires a willingness to be different. It requires you to ignore the Joneses while they leverage themselves into oblivion. But the potential reward is the most valuable asset in existence. Your life, reclaiming it while you are still young enough to live it. If you are ready to stop sleepwalking through your financial life and start engineering your exit, you are in the right place. We are going to treat this with the seriousness of a university curriculum. So, let us begin by defining the core equation that makes all of this possible. To understand FIRE, you must first understand the gap. This brings us to the fundamental concept of the gap between income and ego. The gap is simply the difference between what you earn and what you burn. It sounds almost insultingly simple, but this specific metric is the absolute bedrock of the FIRE movement. Most traditional financial advice focuses obsessively on the earn side of the equation. We are taught to hustle for the promotion, get the side gig, and maximize the top line. While earning more is a powerful accelerant, it is mathematically irrelevant if your burn matches your earn. Let us look at the Dr. Jones scenario to illustrate this. Imagine Dr. Jones is a specialized surgeon in Chicago. He earns $400,000 a year. This places him in the top 1% of earners in the United States. By societal standards, he is rich. But Dr. Jones lives in a $2 million home with a jumbo mortgage. He leases 2 luxury SUVs for $2,000 a month. He sends 3 children to private preparatory schools. He eats out at Michelin-star restaurants 4 times a week. At the end of the year, after taxes and his lifestyle costs, Dr. Jones has spent exactly $400,000. His gap is 0. His savings rate is 0%. Despite his high income, Dr. Jones is living paycheck to paycheck. He is arguably more fragile than a low-wage worker because his fixed burn rate is so incredibly high. If he loses his ability to use his hands, his financial life collapses within 90 days. He has no freedom. He is an indentured servant to his own lifestyle. Now, contrast this with Sarah. Sarah is a graphic designer in a mid-sized city making $60,000 a year. It is a respectable salary, but certainly not headline-grabbing. However, Sarah has optimized her expenses. She drives a paid-off Honda Civic. She shares a modest apartment or house hacks by renting out a spare room. She cooks at home. Her total annual expenses are $30,000. Sarah saves $30,000 a year. Her savings rate is 50%. Here is where the math becomes counterintuitive and incredibly powerful. Because Sarah only needs $30,000 to survive, she is essentially buying 1 year of freedom for every 1 year she works. Dr. Jones, despite earning nearly 7 times what Sarah earns, is buying 0 years of freedom. This brings us to the shockingly simple math behind early retirement, a concept popularized by seminal FIRE voices. The math dictates that your time to retirement is not based on your return on investment, ROI. It is primarily driven by your savings rate. If you save 10% of your income, the standard advice given by most traditional financial planners, it will take you roughly 51 years to retire, assuming historical market returns of around 5 to 7% adjusted for inflation. Why? Because for every 1 year you work, you are saving enough to fund only a few weeks of retirement. You have to work 9 years to save enough to cover 1 year of living expenses. Now, look at what happens when you increase that savings rate to 50%. The timeline collapses. At a 50% savings rate, assuming you start from 0, historical models suggest you can reach financial independence in roughly 17 years. You have slashed 34 years off your working life simply by manipulating the gap. If you go extreme like the lean FIRE practitioners who manage a 75% savings rate, the timeline drops to under 7 years. This is how people retire in their early 30s. It is not magic, it is arithmetic. This phenomenon occurs because of a double effect. When you increase your savings rate by cutting expenses, you are doing 2 things simultaneously. First, you are increasing the amount of capital you are throwing into your investment engine. That is the obvious part. But the second part is more subtle and more important. You are permanently lowering the amount of money you need to survive. If you learn to be happy living on $40,000 a year instead of $80,000, you have just cut your freedom number. The total amount of invested assets you need to retire in half. You need half the nest egg and you are saving twice as fast to get there. This is why cutting expenses is mathematically more powerful than increasing income, especially in the early stages. Every dollar you cut from your monthly budget reduces the amount of capital you need invested by a factor of 25, based on the 4% rule we will discuss later. Eliminating a $100 monthly subscription does not just save you $1,200 a year. It lowers your required retirement portfolio by $30,000. That is $30,000 you do not have to earn, save, and invest. However, maintaining this gap requires battling a psychological enemy hardwired into the human brain. Hedonic adaptation, often called the hedonic treadmill. Human beings are evolutionarily designed to adapt to their circumstances. When you get a raise, you feel a spike of dopamine. You feel richer. You upgrade your apartment, you buy the nicer wine, you book the premium economy seat. For 3 months, this feels like a luxury. But by month 4, it feels normal. It becomes your new baseline. To get that same dopamine hit again, you need another upgrade. This is lifestyle creep. It is the reason why high-income earners often have the lowest net worths. They run faster and faster on the treadmill, but the scenery never changes. The FIRE movement requires you to step off the treadmill. It asks you to decouple your spending from your income. Imagine you get a $10,000 raise next week. The normal script says you can now afford a car payment that costs $10,000 a year. You break even. The FIRE script says you have just acquired an extra $10,000 asset purchasing machine. If you bank that entire raise and do not change your lifestyle, you have dramatically accelerated your freedom date. Case studies in the FIRE community often feature couples who decided to live on one salary while saving the other entirely. Let's look at a hypothetical couple, the Millers. They both earn $70,000. They decide that $70,000 is plenty to live a comfortable middle-class life. They bank the second salary entirely. After taxes, they are likely saving $40,000 to $50,000 a year. Within 10 years, historically speaking, they could have $500,000 to $700,000 invested. At that point, the compound interest from their portfolio might start earning more than one of their jobs. This leads us to the concept of the crossover point. This is the holy grail of the FIRE movement. The crossover point is the exact moment in time when the monthly income generated by your investments exceeds your monthly living expenses. Graphically visualize two lines. The red line is your monthly expenses. Through discipline and avoiding lifestyle creep, you keep this line flat or even trending downward. The green line is your passive income: dividends, interest, capital gains, and rental income. At the beginning of your journey, the green line is at zero. As you pump money into the gap, the green line starts to curve upward. Slowly at first, then aggressively. The day those two lines cross is the day you become financially independent. You no longer need to trade your time for money to survive. You work because you want to, not because you have to. But here is the critical question that separates the dreamers from the achievers. What do you do with the money in the gap? You cannot just put it in a savings account yielding 0.01%. Inflation, the silent killer of wealth, will erode its purchasing power every single year. If you bury your money in the backyard, you are guaranteed to lose wealth over time. To make the math work, to compress 40 years of work into 15, your money must work harder than you do. You need to harness the most powerful force in the financial universe, a force that Albert Einstein reportedly called the eighth wonder of the world. You have the gap. You have the discipline. Now you need the engine. In part 3, we are going to open the hood of that engine. We are going to explain exactly how money grows, why the human brain is terrible at understanding exponential functions, and how a specific investment vehicle can turn your savings into a perpetual income machine that lasts forever. We are moving from simple addition to exponential multiplication. Compound interest is that eighth wonder. It is the engine of the FIRE movement, but to truly harness it, you must understand why the human brain is biologically wired to underestimate it. Our ancestors evolved in a linear world. If you hunted one mammoth, you had food for a week. If you hunted two, you had food for 2 weeks. That is linear progression. 1 + 1 = 2. But wealth does not grow linearly. It grows exponentially. In an exponential environment, 1 + 1 = 2, but 2 + 2 = 4, 4 + 4 = 8, and suddenly you are at 1,000,000. Let's conduct a thought experiment that is often cited in financial literacy courses because it perfectly illustrates the hockey stick curve of wealth creation. Imagine I offer you a choice. Option A: I give you $3 million in cash right now, today. Option B: I give you a single magic penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days. Most people, driven by the desire for immediate security, instinctively look at the $3 million. It is tangible. It is life-changing. The penny seems like a joke. On day 5, you have 16 cents. You feel foolish. You could have had $3 million. On day 10, you have $5.12. You are still regretting your choice. By day 20, 2/3 of the way through the month, you have $5,242. You are still miles away from the $3 million lump sum. The linear thinker looks at this and says the strategy has failed. But then the magic of the curve kicks in. On day 29, that penny has grown to roughly $2.7 million. You are close. On day 30, it is $5.3 million. And on the final day, day 31, you end up with $10,737,418. You ended up with more than 3 times the original lump sum. The lesson here is critical for the aspiring early retiree. The massive gains always come at the end of the curve. The first few years of investing feel like pushing a boulder uphill. You save $10,000 and the market grows it by $700. Feels insignificant. But if you stay the course, there comes a year where your portfolio grows by more than your entire annual salary. That is when the boulder starts rolling down the other side of the hill, gathering speed on its own. So, how do we apply this penny logic to the real world? We use the rule of 72. This is a mental math shortcut used by investors to estimate how long it will take for an investment to double in value. You take the number 72 and divide it by your annual rate of return. If you keep your money in a high-yield savings account earning 4%, 72 divided by 4 is 18. Takes 18 years for your money to double. That is too slow for FIRE. However, the historical average annual return of the U.S. stock market, specifically the S&P 500, is roughly 10% before inflation. If we are conservative and adjust for inflation, we often use 7% as a realistic baseline for purchasing power growth. 72 divided by 7 is roughly 10. This means that effectively invested capital has the potential to double its purchasing power every decade. If you invest $100,000 at age 30, it could potentially be $200,000 at 40, $400,000 at 50, and $800,000 at 60, without you adding another dime. But where does this growth come from? This brings us to the vehicle. You cannot simply save your way to early retirement using a bank account. You must become an owner. The primary vehicle for the FIRE movement is the low-cost broad market index fund. For decades, Wall Street convinced the public that investing was complex, dangerous, and required expensive experts to pick the winning stocks. They told you to find the needle in the haystack. The philosophy of the FIRE movement, heavily influenced by the late Jack Bogle, founder of Vanguard, is different. Don't look for the needle. Buy the haystack. When you buy a total stock market index fund or an S&P 500 index fund, you are not betting on a single company like Apple or Tesla. You are buying a tiny slice of the entire American economy. You are becoming a fractional owner of the 500 largest, most profitable publicly traded corporations in the United States. This vehicle is a self-cleansing mechanism. This is a crucial concept. If a company in the S&P 500 starts to fail, think of Blockbuster or Kodak, its value drops and eventually it is removed from the index. It is replaced by a new, growing company, think of Netflix or Google. As an index fund investor, you do not need to predict these changes. The index does it for you automatically. You are permanently aligned with the winners because the losers are systematically weeded out. Let's look at a comparative case study to show the cost of waiting. This is the tale of early Earl and late Larry. Earl starts investing at age 25. He is aggressive. He invests $500 a month into a standard S&P 500 index fund. He does this for exactly 10 years. At age 35, Earl stops. He never adds another penny to the account, but he leaves the money invested to grow. He has contributed a total of $60,000 of his own cash. Larry is different. Larry wants to live his life first. He waits until age 35 to start. But Larry is disciplined. He invests the same $500 a month every single month, from age 35 all the way until age 65. Larry invests for 30 years straight. He contributes a total of $180,000 of his own cash, 3 times what Earl contributed. Assuming a historical average return of 8% for both scenarios, who comes out ahead at age 65? You might intuitively think Larry wins because he put in 3 times as much money. But the math says otherwise. Earl, who stopped saving 30 years ago, ends up with a portfolio worth approximately $787,000. Larry, who slaved away saving for 30 years, ends up with roughly $679,000. Earl wins by over $100,000, despite doing 1/3 of the work. Why? Because his money had 10 extra years to double. Those early doubling periods are more powerful than the raw capital injected later in life. This illustrates the time value of money. In the FIRE movement, time is your most precious resource, not just because you want to enjoy it, but because it is the primary lever of wealth. Every dollar you spend in your 20s is not just a dollar gone. It is potentially $10 or $20 missing from your freedom fund in your 40s or 50s. This is also why the FIRE movement is terrified of inflation. Inflation is the silent tax that destroys the value of cash. If inflation runs at 3%, your cash loses half its value every 24 years. If you keep your savings under a mattress, you are guaranteed to lose. Investing in the market is not just about growth. It is a defensive necessity to preserve your purchasing power against the printing of fiat currency. So, we have established the framework. You create a gap between your income and expenses. You take that surplus capital and pour it into the engine of the stock market via low-cost index funds. You let the rule of 72 and compound interest multiply that wealth over a compressed timeline of 10 to 15 years. But this creates a terrifying uncertainty. If you retire at 35 or 40, you might have 50 years of life left to fund. The stock market goes up, but it also crashes. We have seen drops of 30, 40, even 50%. How do you know you have enough? How do you know your money won't run out when you are 80 years old and unemployable? Is $1 million enough? Is $2 million? For decades, this was a guessing game. Then, in the 1990s, three professors at Trinity University ran a simulation that changed financial planning forever. They stress-tested retirement portfolios against the worst economic disasters in history: the Great Depression, the stagflation of the 70s, and the dot-com busts. What they found produced a single golden number. A number that tells you exactly how much you need to walk away from your job forever. In Part 4, we are going to dissect the Trinity study and the 4% rule. And I will explain why this number is the finish line you have been looking for. The Trinity study is the scientific bedrock upon which the modern early retirement movement is built. Before 1998, retirement planning was largely anecdotal. Financial advisors use crude estimates, often telling clients to live off the interest and never touch the principal. But in a world of fluctuating interest rates and volatile inflation, that advice was dangerously vague. Then came three professors from Trinity University in Texas: Philip Cooley, Carl Hubbard, and Daniel Walls. They decided to stop guessing and start simulating. They asked a specific question. If an investor retires with a set portfolio of stocks and bonds, and withdraws a specific inflation-adjusted percentage every single year, how often will they run out of money before they die? To answer this, they looked at rolling payout periods across nearly a century of market data, covering the years 1926 to 1995. This dataset included the most catastrophic economic events in American history: the market crash of 1929, the Great Depression, World War II, and the stagflation of the 1970s, where stocks went sideways while inflation skyrocketed. They didn't just look at the averages, they looked at the nightmares. They tested various withdrawal rates: 3%, 4%, 5%, and so on. They tested various portfolio allocations: 100% stocks, 100% bonds, and various mixes like 50-50 or 75-25. The results were a revelation. They found that a portfolio consisting of at least 50% stocks and 50% bonds had a 95 to 98% success rate over a 30-year period if the retiree withdrew 4% of the initial portfolio value in the first year, and then adjusted that dollar amount for inflation in every subsequent year. This is the birth of the 4% rule. It is critical that we understand the mechanics of this rule, because it is often misunderstood. The rule does not mean you withdraw 4% of your portfolio's current value each year. If you did that, your income would fluctuate wildly with the market, and you would never technically run out of money, but you might starve during a recession. The rule states you take 4% of the starting balance. Let's run a simulation with the fictional character, retiree Rick. Rick saves exactly $1 million. He retires on January 1st. According to the 4% rule, Rick can withdraw $40,000 to live on for that first year. Now imagine that during year 1, inflation in the United States runs at 3%. The cost of milk, gas, and housing goes up. To maintain his purchasing power, Rick needs a raise. So, in year 2, he does not look at his portfolio balance. He looks at his previous withdrawal of $40,000 and adds 3% to it. 40,000 times 1.03 equals $41,200. Rick withdraws $41,200 in year 2. He does this regardless of whether the stock market went up 20% or crashed 30%. The model assumes he ignores the market noise and follows the inflation adjustment. The Trinity study showed that in 95% of historical scenarios, Rick's portfolio would survive for at least 30 years. In fact, in the vast majority of those successful scenarios, Rick didn't just scrape by with $0 left at the end. Because the stock market historically trends upward over long periods, the terminal value of the portfolio was often massive. In many simulations, Rick died with 2 or 3 times his original starting principal, despite withdrawing an inflation-adjusted salary for 3 decades. This study changed everything because it gave us the rule of 25. If 4% is the safe withdrawal rate, we can reverse the math to find your freedom number. 1 divided by 0.04 is 25. Therefore, to find the amount of money you need to retire, you simply take your annual expenses and multiply them by 25. This makes the goal concrete. It removes the mystery. If you are a minimalist lean fire adherent who can live happily on $30,000 a year, the math is simple. 30,000 times 25 is $750,000. Once you have $750,000 invested in a broad market index fund portfolio, historical data suggests you are financially independent. You are done. If you are a fat fire aspirant who wants a 6-figure lifestyle of $100,000 a year, you need $2.5 million invested. Let's apply this to a real-world comparison to show why this number is so empowering. Imagine a standard employee, Jennifer, who believes she needs $10 million to retire because she is terrified of running out. She earns $80,000 a year and spends $70,000. She saves $10,000 a year. At that rate, reaching $10 million is impossible. She feels defeated and assumes she will work until she dies. Now, introduce her to the rule of 25. If she can optimize her lifestyle and live on $40,000 a year, which is possible in many parts of the US with a paid-off house or careful budgeting, her target is not 10 million, it is 1 million. Suddenly, the finish line moves from the moon to the end of the block. A $1 million portfolio is achievable for a middle-class earner with a high savings rate and compound interest over 15 to 20 years. The Trinity study transforms retirement from a nebulous hope into a simple engineering problem. However, we must apply a layer of scrutiny here. This is a masterclass, not a cheerleading session. There are valid criticisms of the Trinity study that we must address to ensure your plan is bulletproof. First, the Trinity study looked at a 30-year timeline. This is standard for a 65-year-old retiree who likely won't live past 95. But if you retire at 35, you need your money to last 50 or 60 years. Does the 4% rule hold up for that long? Updated simulations by financial researchers like Wade Pfau and Michael Kitces suggest that extending the timeline to 50 years slightly reduces the success rate of the 4% rule, perhaps down to the 85 or 90% range. To be 100% safe, many in the FIRE community advocate for a 3.5% rule or a 3% rule if you are retiring extremely early. This requires a larger nest egg, multiplying your expenses by 30 or 33 instead of 25, but it provides a massive safety margin. Second, the Trinity study assumes you are a robot. It assumes you will blindly take your inflation-adjusted raise, even if the world economy is collapsing and your portfolio is down 50%. In reality, humans are flexible. If the market crashes, you can cut your spending. You can cancel the vacation. You can pick up a side hustle. This flexibility buffer actually makes the 4% rule more conservative than the study suggests, because you have the agency to react to bad times. But there is a hidden danger in the data that the averages essentially hide. It is a statistical trap that has destroyed the retirements of people who thought they were safe. The Trinity study relies on average returns over long periods. But you do not live in the average. You live in the specific sequence of years that occur right after you quit your job. Imagine two retirees. Both retire with $1 million. Both withdraw $40,000 a year. Both experience an average market return of 7% over 30 years. They should have the same result, right? Wrong. Retiree A retires into a bull market. The market goes up 20% in year 1 and 10% in year 2. His portfolio grows so fast that his withdrawals are just skimming off the profit. He gets rich while retired. Retiree B retires into a bear market. The market drops 20% in year 1 and another 20% in year 2. He withdraws his $40,000, but now he is selling shares at rock-bottom prices. He is cannibalizing his principal just to survive. Even if the market booms later, he has too little money left to catch the recovery. This is called sequence of returns risk. It is the single biggest threat to the FIRE movement. It is the reason why hitting your number might not be enough if you quit at the absolute worst possible moment. So, how do you protect yourself from a bad start? How do you bulletproof your portfolio against a recession in the first 5 years of your early retirement? In Part 5, we are going to discuss the cash cushion, the bond tent, and the advanced withdrawal strategies that mitigate this risk, ensuring that even if the market crashes the day after your retirement party, you will stay solvent. Sequence of returns risk is the mathematical equivalent of a hurricane hitting your house the day after you cancel your flood insurance. It is the only thing that truly keeps early retirees awake at night. If the market tanks 40% while you are in the accumulation phase working and saving, it is actually good news. You are buying shares on sale. But if that same crash happens the year you retire, it is a catastrophe because you are now a seller, not a buyer. You are forced to liquidate assets at depressed prices to pay your mortgage and buy groceries, permanently impairing your portfolio's ability to recover. To neutralize this threat, successful FIRE practitioners do not just rely on the 4% rule blindly. They build fortifications. The first and most common line of defense is the cash cushion, often referred to in financial planning circles as a volatility buffer. Imagine you retire with a $1 million portfolio. Instead of having all $1 million in the stock market, you deliberately set aside 2 to 3 years of living expenses in high-yield cash equivalents, money market accounts, certificates of deposit, or high-yield savings accounts. If your annual burn rate is $40,000, you might keep $80,000 to $120,000 in cash. This is your moat. Now let us play out the crash of 2008 scenario. The S&P 500 plummets nearly 50%. Panic sweeps the globe. Banks are failing. If you were fully invested in stocks, you would be forced to sell your index funds at a 50% loss just to pay your electric bill. That is wealth destruction. But with a cash cushion, you do nothing. You ignore the stock market entirely. For the next 2 years while the world is panicking, you simply spend down your cash reserves. You do not sell a single share of stock. You allow your portfolio to sit undisturbed, riding out the storm. By the time your cash runs out 2 or 3 years later, historical trends suggest the market has likely recovered significantly. You effectively bridged the gap without realizing any losses. You bought yourself time, and in the world of investing, time is the antidote to volatility. The second, more advanced fortification is known as the bond tent. This strategy addresses the specific vulnerability of the red zone, the 5 years before and the 5 years after your retirement date. This 10-year window is when your portfolio is most fragile. Visually, imagine the shape of a tent. The vertical axis is your allocation to bonds, safe, stable assets, and the horizontal axis is your age. During your 20s and 30s, your bond allocation is low, perhaps 0 or 10%, because you want maximum growth from stocks. As you approach your early retirement date, you start ramping up your bond allocation aggressively. You are building the left side of the tent. By the day you quit your job, your bond allocation peaks. You might be at 60% stocks and 40% bonds, or even 50-50. This is the peak of the tent. This high bond allocation acts as a shock absorber. If the market crashes the day after you retire, half your portfolio is stable. You have mitigated the downside risk. Then, as you move through your early retirement years, you slowly spend down the bonds and allow your stock allocation to drift back up. You slide down the right side of the tent. 10 years into retirement, you might be back to 80 or 90% stocks. Why? Because once you have survived the initial red zone, without a crash wiping you out, your portfolio has likely grown enough that you no longer need the safety of bonds. You can afford to take risks again to combat inflation over the long term. The bond tent is a temporary shield raised specifically for the transition period. However, structural defenses like cash and bonds are passive. To be truly bulletproof, you must also employ active, dynamic defenses. This brings us to variable withdrawal strategies, often popularized by financial researchers like Jonathan Guyton and William Klinger. The 4% rule is static. It assumes you are a rigid machine that increases spending by inflation every year regardless of reality. A variable withdrawal strategy is flexible. It uses guardrails. Think of driving a car on a highway. The center of the lane is your target spending. If the market performs well, you stay in the lane and take your inflation adjustment. If the market booms and your portfolio grows significantly, you hit the upper guardrail. The rule says you can actually give yourself a raise, increase your withdrawal rate to enjoy the abundance. But if the market crashes and your portfolio value drops by, say, 20%, you hit the lower guardrail. The rule dictates that you cut your spending. You do not take the inflation adjustment that year. In severe cases, you might reduce your withdrawal by 10%. This might sound painful, but let's look at the impact. Research suggests that being willing to cut your spending by just a small margin during a bear market can virtually eliminate the risk of running out of money. It raises the portfolio success rate from 95% to near 100%. Consider the case of flexible Frank. Frank retires with $1 million. A recession hits. His portfolio drops to $800,000. Instead of withdrawing his usual $40,000, Frank switches to survival mode. He cuts his travel budget. He stops eating out. He reduces his withdrawal to $32,000 for 2 years. It is uncomfortable, yes. But because Frank did not pillage his portfolio during the downturn, he preserved his capital base. When the market rebounds, his portfolio shoots back up, and he resumes his normal spending. He sacrificed luxury for 24 months to secure freedom for 40 years. This is the trade-off that the FIRE movement embraces: short-term discipline for long-term sovereignty. We also have to consider the yield shield. This is a strategy favored by dividend investors. Instead of relying on selling shares, capital gains, to fund your life, you structure your portfolio to generate cash flow through dividends and interest. If your portfolio yields 3% in dividends, and you only need a 3% withdrawal rate, you never have to sell a single share. You are living entirely off the fruit of the tree without ever chopping off a branch. While this often requires a larger portfolio or specific sector focusing, it provides a massive psychological benefit during downturns, as dividend payouts tend to be less volatile than stock prices. Combining these strategies creates a fortress. You have the gap to build wealth. You have the index funds to grow it. You have the 4% rule to target your number. And now you have the cash cushion, the bond tent, and dynamic withdrawals to defend it against the worst economic disasters history can throw at you. But there is still a massive bureaucratic wall standing between you and your money. We have spent this entire time assuming you can actually access your savings. But the United States tax code is designed to keep you working until old age. The most powerful tax-advantaged accounts, the 401k and the traditional IRA, come with a strict warning label. Do not touch until age 59 and a half. If you retire at 35 and try to pull money out of your 401k to buy groceries, the IRS will hit you with ordinary income tax plus a devastating 10% early withdrawal penalty. This penalty alone can destroy the mathematical viability of early retirement. Does this mean you have to keep your money in a regular taxable brokerage account and miss out on the massive tax breaks of a 401k? No. The FIRE community has found a loophole. It is not really a loophole. It is a specific feature of the tax code that, when used sequentially, functions like a key to unlock your retirement funds decades early, penalty-free. This strategy requires precision planning. Takes 5 years to set up. If you do it wrong, you owe the IRS thousands. If you do it right, you access your millions while you are young enough to enjoy them. In Part 6, we are going to construct the Roth conversion ladder. We will walk through the step-by-step mechanics of moving money from pre-tax to post-tax status, creating a pipeline of accessible cash that bypasses the age restrictions entirely. We are about to turn the tax code into your ally. The United States tax code is often viewed as a weapon used against the accumulation of wealth, but for the astute early retiree, it is actually a toolkit. To understand the Roth conversion ladder, we must first confront the jail cell of standard retirement planning. When you contribute to a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, you are making a deal with the government. You say, "I will not pay taxes on this money today, and in exchange, I promise not to touch it until I am 59 and a half years old." If you break that promise, the penalty is severe. You pay income tax at your current rate, plus a 10% penalty on top. For a retiree living on a tight margin, losing 10% of their withdrawal instantly is a mathematical disaster. It forces you to withdraw even more to cover the net loss, spiraling your portfolio into the ground. So, how do FIRE practitioners access millions of dollars in these accounts at age 35 or 40 without triggering that penalty? They use the Roth conversion ladder to transmute pre-tax money into penalty-free cash. Here is the mechanism. Unlike a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA has a unique superpower. You can withdraw your original contributions, the principal, at any time at any age, tax-free and penalty-free. The government allows this because you have already paid taxes on that money. However, the earnings, the growth, are locked up. The ladder is a strategy to move money from the traditional bucket to the Roth bucket, pay the taxes due at a strategically low rate, and then, after a specific waiting period, access that money as if it were an original contribution. Let's build the ladder step by step using a case study of a couple, the architects, who retire at age 40 with $1 million entirely locked in traditional 401ks. Step 1. The rollover. When the architects quit their corporate jobs, they roll their 401k balances into traditional IRAs. This is a non-taxable event. It simply moves the money from an employer-controlled account to an individual-controlled account. Step 2. The conversion. In their first year of retirement, the architects take $40,000 from their traditional IRA and convert it to a Roth IRA. This is the critical moment. The IRS views this $40,000 as ordinary income. The architects must pay income tax on this amount. But here is the genius of the strategy: because they are retired, they have zero wage income. That $40,000 is their only income for the year. Under the current U.S. tax code, the standard deduction for a married couple is roughly $29,000, adjusted annually for inflation. This means the first $29,000 of that conversion is taxed at 0%. The remaining $11,000 is taxed at the lowest marginal bracket, likely 10%. Compare this to when they were working. If they had earned that money while employed, it would have been taxed at their marginal rate, perhaps 24 or 32%. By deferring the tax until retirement, they have legally engaged in tax arbitrage. They avoided a 30% tax while working to pay a nearly 0% tax while retired. Step 3. The 5-year clock. This is the catch. You cannot touch that converted $40,000 immediately. The IRS mandates a 5-year aging period for each specific conversion to prevent people from dodging penalties instantly. If the architects withdraw that converted money before 5 years have passed, the 10% penalty snaps back into place. So, that $40,000 sits in the Roth IRA. It grows tax-free. Step 4. The pipeline. The architects repeat this process every single year. Year 1. Convert $40,000. Accessible in Year 6. Year 2. Convert $40,000. Accessible in Year 7. Year 3. Convert $40,000. Accessible in Year 8. This creates a ladder of maturing funds. It is like a wine cellar. You are laying down bottles today to drink 5 years from now. But this reveals a glaring logistical problem. What do the architects eat during years 1 through 5? If the money is locked in the 5-year waiting room, how do they survive? This necessitates the bridge account. To execute the Roth conversion ladder, you must have roughly 5 years of living expenses saved in a standard, taxable brokerage account, or in original Roth contributions made during your working years. This capital bridges the gap between your retirement date and the maturity of your first ladder rung. Imagine the timeline visually. From age 40 to 45, the architects live off their cash savings and taxable investments. They are seemingly depleting their liquid assets, which feels scary. But in the background, their Roth pipeline is filling up. On January 1st of the year they turn 45, the conversion they made at age 40 unlocks. Suddenly, $40,000 becomes available penalty-free. They spend that money during year 45. Meanwhile, the conversion they made at age 41 is maturing for use at age 46. Once the pipeline is established, it provides a perpetual stream of accessible cash that you control. You determine how much income you show the IRS each year by deciding how much to convert. This allows you to manage your adjusted gross income, AGI, with surgical precision, which becomes incredibly important for healthcare subsidies, which we will discuss shortly. Now, is there an alternative for those who did not plan ahead? What if you retire tomorrow, have zero cash bridge, and all your money is in a 401k? Are you trapped? Not entirely. There is a break glass in case of emergency clause in the tax code called Rule 72T, or Substantially Equal Periodic Payments, SEP. This rule allows you to bypass the 10% penalty and the 5-year wait entirely, but it comes with handcuffs. Rule 72T requires you to calculate a specific withdrawal amount based on your life expectancy and interest rates, essentially turning your IRA into a rigid annuity. You must take exactly that amount every single year for 5 years or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is longer. If you calculate that you need to withdraw $32,000 a year, you must withdraw exactly that. You cannot take less if you don't need it. You cannot take more if you have an emergency. And most terrifyingly, if you mess up the calculation or miss a withdrawal by a single day, the IRS invalidates the entire arrangement. They will retroactively charge you the 10% penalty on every single dollar you withdrew in previous years, plus interest. Because of this rigidity and risk, the Roth conversion ladder is widely considered the superior strategy for the FIRE movement. It offers flexibility. If you have a year where you need less money, you convert less. If tax laws change, you can adjust your strategy without breaking a rigid contract with the IRS. The Roth conversion ladder does more than just provide cash flow. It cleans your money. You are systematically taking funds that have a tax liability attached to them, traditional IRA, and washing them into a bucket that is forever tax-free, Roth IRA. By the time you hit age 60 or 70, a massive portion of your wealth may be in Roth accounts, protecting you from required minimum distributions, RMDs, and future tax hikes. However, this strategy requires you to pay close attention to the tax brackets. If you convert too much in 1 year, you might push yourself into a higher bracket, defeating the purpose of the arbitrage. It is a game of efficiency. You are trying to fill up the lowest tax buckets, the standard deduction, the 10% bracket, and the 12% bracket, to the brim, but not spill over a single drop into the higher brackets. This sounds perfect, right? You have your gap. You have your index funds. You have your 4% rule. You have your cash cushion. And now you have a tax-efficient pipeline to access your millions. You are ready to hand in your resignation letter. But wait, there is one variable we have not accounted for. It is the single most expensive line item for most Americans, often costing more than a mortgage. It is the reason people stay in jobs they despise simply for the benefits. In the United States, leaving your job means losing your health insurance. If you are 40 years old, you are 25 years away from Medicare. One serious illness, cancer, a heart attack, a car accident, without insurance can bankrupt you, regardless of how perfect your Roth conversion ladder is. The cost of private insurance on the open market can be astronomical, running $2,000 a month or more for a family. How do early retirees solve this? Do they just pay $25,000 a year for premiums? No. They use the very low income we just engineered with the Roth ladder to unlock a massive government subsidy. In Part 7, we are going to decode the Affordable Care Act, ACA. We will explain how the Magi Cliff works or used to work, how to optimize your income to get your health insurance premiums paid for by the government, and the alternative health sharing systems that exist outside the insurance market. We are going to show you how to hack healthcare. To the uninitiated, the American healthcare system is a labyrinth designed to extract maximum capital from the vulnerable. For the early retiree, it represents the single largest variable risk in their financial fortress. You can calculate safe withdrawal rates to the decimal point, but one unanticipated week in an intensive care unit can generate a bill that rivals the cost of a small home. The standard corporate employee is shielded from this reality. Their employer subsidizes 70 or 80% of the premium cost. When you retire at 35, that shield vanishes. You are thrown into the open market. If you were to simply Google private family health insurance plan, right now the numbers would stop your heart. For a family of 4, premiums can easily exceed $2,500 a month. That is $30,000 a year of post-tax money, just for the privilege of having a high deductible. If you need $30,000 just for premiums, your FIRE number jumps by $750,000. That is years of extra work. But here is the secret that wealthy early retirees use to bypass this cost. The Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare, does not care about your net worth. It only cares about your taxable income. You could be sitting on a portfolio of $5 million. You could own 3 paid-off houses. But if your modified adjusted gross income, or MAGI, is structured correctly, the U.S. government views you as a low-income household and will pay the vast majority of your insurance premiums for you. This is where the strategies we discussed in Part 6, the Roth conversion ladder and taxable brokerage accounts, become superpowers. They allow you to decouple your cash flow from your reported income. Let's look at a case study. The Strategic Smiths. The Smiths are a couple age 45 with 1 child. They need $60,000 of actual cash flow to live their life. If they earn $60,000 from a W-2 job, their income is $60,000. Simple. But the Smiths are retired. To get their $60,000, they do 2 things. First, they sell $30,000 worth of stock from their taxable brokerage account. Because of the way capital gains work, much of that sale is simply the return of their own principal, which is not taxed. Let's assume only $10,000 of that is gain. Second, they do a Roth conversion of $30,000. This counts as income. So, while they have $60,000 in their pocket to spend, their reported MAGI on their tax return is only $40,000. At this income level under the Affordable Care Act structure, the Smiths qualify for massive, advanced premium tax credits. These are not tax deductions you wait until April to receive. These are direct payments the government sends to the insurance company every month on your behalf. Instead of paying $2,000 a month for a silver plan, the Smiths might see a bill for $150. Or, in some zip codes and specific legislative environments, $0. They are getting a $24,000 a year benefit simply because they understand how to manipulate the definition of income. But the optimization goes deeper than just premiums. We need to talk about the Silver Plan secret, formerly known as cost-sharing reductions, CSR. Most people look at the bronze, silver, and gold tiers and assume gold is best. But for the FIRE community, the silver tier holds a hidden mechanism. If your income falls between 100% and 250% of the federal poverty level, which is exactly where many lean FIRE retirees intentionally land, you do not just get cheaper premiums. You get a better insurance policy. The government steps in and artificially lowers your deductible, your copays, and your out-of-pocket maximums. A silver plan that normally has a $6,000 deductible might suddenly transform into a plan with a $500 deductible for a qualifying household. This effectively turns a mid-tier plan into a platinum tier policy for pennies on the dollar. This is the sweet spot of early retirement healthcare. However, This strategy requires walking a razor's edge. If you earn too much, the subsidies fade away. Historically, there was a subsidy cliff, where earning $1 over the limit caused you to lose thousands in support. While recent legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act softened this cliff into a smoother slide, the principle remains. Higher income equals higher costs. Conversely, there is a trap at the bottom. If you manage your income too well and show a magi that is too low, specifically below 100% of the federal poverty level in states that did not expand Medicaid, you fall into the coverage gap. You earn too little for subsidies, but you are not eligible for Medicaid. Or, perhaps worse for someone trying to protect assets, you do end up on Medicaid. While Medicaid is a vital safety net, it can be problematic for someone with $1 million net worth. The selection of doctors can be limited, waiting times can be long, and critically, some states have estate recovery programs. This means that after you die, the state can theoretically come after your assets like your home to reimburse themselves for the medical care they paid for. For a fire practitioner building generational wealth, this is an unacceptable risk. Therefore, the goal is magi engineering. You want to report enough income to stay safely above the Medicaid line, but low enough to maximize subsidies and CSRs. You might intentionally convert more Roth funds than you need, just to bump your income up to the sweet spot. Now, what if you morally object to the ACA? Or what if the political landscape shifts and the subsidies are repealed? Is there a backup plan? Enter the health-sharing ministries. These are not insurance companies. They are nonprofit organizations where members share each other's medical costs. Examples include MediShare, Liberty HealthShare, and Samaritan Ministries. The concept is simple. You pay a monthly share, think premium, and when you have a medical need, the community shares, think pays your bill. The costs are often 50% lower than unsubsidized private insurance. For a healthy couple, it might cost $400 to $500 a month total. But there is a massive asterisk attached to this option. Because they are not insurance, they are not bound by the Affordable Care Act regulations. They do not have to cover pre-existing conditions. If you have diabetes or a history of cancer, they can deny you membership or exclude those conditions from coverage. They often have lifestyle requirements. You may have to sign a statement of faith, pledge to attend church, abstain from tobacco, and limit alcohol consumption. If you get into a drunk driving accident, they will likely refuse to pay your medical bills because you violated the member code. Most importantly, there is no legal guarantee of payment. With insurance, you have a contract. With a ministry, you have a voluntary arrangement. If the ministry runs out of money, you are on your own. For many in the fire community who are young, extremely healthy, and willing to take on risk, health sharing is a viable stopgap. It protects against the catastrophic, $1 million cancer diagnosis, while keeping monthly fixed costs low. But as you age, the risks often outweigh the savings. There is a third option, one that is becoming increasingly popular as remote work normalizes: medical tourism, or expat health insurance. If you are willing to leave the United States, the healthcare equation flips upside down. In countries like Portugal, Thailand, or Mexico, out-of-pocket medical care often costs less than the copay in the US. High-quality international health insurance for an expat living in Spain might cost $200 a month for a comprehensive plan. We have seen case studies of early retirees who simply fly to Costa Rica or Malaysia for elective surgeries because the flight plus the hospital bill is cheaper than their US deductible. This realization that the cost of your life depends entirely on where you live that life leads us to the next major lever in the fire machine. We have optimized your income, your taxes, and your healthcare. But we are still assuming you are living in the same expensive house, in the same expensive zip code, paying the same expensive property taxes. What if you could slash your single biggest expense, housing, by 50% or more, without lowering your standard of living? What if moving 100 miles to the left, or across an ocean, could accelerate your retirement date by 5 years? In Part 8, we are going to explore geographic arbitrage. We will look at the math of moving from a high cost of living HL area to a low cost of living LCL area. We will discuss house hacking, the strategy of living for free by monetizing your living space, and we will analyze the extreme but alluring world of geofire, where retiring abroad turns a modest nest egg into a king's ransom. We are about to pack our bags. Housing is the financial anchor that keeps most Americans stationary. The Bureau of Labor Statistics consistently reports that housing accounts for 33 to 40% of the average American household's budget. It is the largest line item, the biggest liability, and the primary reason you feel you cannot afford to retire. But in the FIRE movement, we view geography not as a fixed constraint, but as a variable in the wealth equation. This is the principle of geographic arbitrage. The concept is rooted in a simple economic reality. A dollar is not a fixed unit of value. A dollar in downtown Manhattan buys you a cup of coffee. That same dollar in rural Arkansas might buy you a meal. That same dollar in Chiang Mai, Thailand might buy you a massage. The value of your money is relative to your location. Most people live where they work. This was necessary in the industrial age. You had to be near the factory or the office tower. But in the post-2020 remote work era, this linkage has been severed for millions. If you are earning a San Francisco salary but living in a San Francisco apartment, you are voluntarily incinerating your wealth. You are paying a location premium that you no longer need to pay. Let's look at the domestic application first. Moving from a high cost of living HL area to a low cost of living LSOL area within the United States. Consider tech worker Tom. Tom earns $120,000 a year. He lives in Seattle. His rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $2,500 a month. After taxes and his high cost of living, groceries, parking, state income tax, he saves 10% of his income. Now imagine Tom negotiates a remote position or finds a new job in a city like Cleveland, Ohio, or Tulsa, Oklahoma. He might take a pay cut to $100,000. On paper, he earns less. But in Tulsa, he can buy a 3-bedroom house for a mortgage of $1,200 a month. His groceries are 20% cheaper. His state income tax burden drops or vanishes depending on the specific move. Think Texas or Florida. Even with the lower salary, Tom's gap, the difference between his income and expenses, explodes. He might go from saving $12,000 a year to saving $40,000 a year. He has tripled his wealth accumulation speed simply by renting a U-Haul truck. This is the coastal exit strategy, and it is currently reshaping American demographics. But for those who want to be even more aggressive, we must discuss house hacking. This is the strategy that eliminates the housing expense entirely. House hacking typically involves buying a small multifamily property, a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, living in one unit and renting out the others. Here is the math behind a typical house hack. You find a fourplex listed for $400,000 in a mid-sized market. Because you are going to live there, you qualify for an FHA loan which requires a down payment of only 3.5%. That is $14,000 down. You do not need to be rich to enter the game. You live in Unit A. You rent out Units B, C, and D for $1,000 each. Your total rental income is $3,000 a month. Your mortgage, insurance, and taxes might be $2,800 a month. Do the math. Your tenants are paying your entire mortgage. You are living for free. In fact, you are getting paid $200 a month to live in your own house. Effectively, you have reduced your largest expense to zero. When you remove housing costs from your budget, your savings rate instantly jumps from typical levels to 50 or 60%. You have also acquired an appreciating asset that pays down its own debt. In 30 years, you will own $1 million asset free and clear, funded entirely by other people's rent checks. This is how 26-year-olds in the FIRE community build 6-figure net worths on average salaries. They do not view a house as a home to consume. They view it as a business they sleep in. But the ultimate leverage, the nuclear option of the FIRE movement, is international geo-arbitrage, often called geo-FIRE. This strategy leverages the massive strength of the US dollar, or euro to pound, against developing currencies. It involves earning in a strong currency and spending in a weak one. Let's revisit the 4% rule. If you want to live a middle-class lifestyle in a major US city, costing perhaps $60,000 a year, you need a portfolio of $1.5 million. Saving $1.5 million takes decades of grinding. But what if you move to a country where a luxury lifestyle costs $24,000 a year? In places like Portugal, Mexico, Vietnam, or Thailand, $2,000 a month can provide a quality of life that would cost $8,000 or $10,000 a month in the US. We are talking about eating out for every meal, having a housekeeper, living in a modern condo with a pool, and having comprehensive health insurance. If your annual burn rate drops to $24,000, your FIRE number drops to $600,000. Suddenly, retirement is not 20 years away. It is 3 years away. This is the expat arbitrage. We are seeing waves of early retirees moving to the Silver Coast of Portugal or the Lake Chapala region of Mexico. They are not fleeing, they are optimizing. They realize that staying in the US means working an extra 10 years just to pay for the proximity to a Target and a Starbucks. Case studies suggest that this is not just about being cheap, it is about lifestyle design. A couple with a modest portfolio of $800,000 is poor in New York City. They are stressed about bills. That same couple with $800,000 in Bali is wealthy. They are philanthropists. They have total time freedom. They can fund local charities, start passion businesses, and travel constantly because their passive income from the US stock market covers their expenses 3 times over. Of course, this comes with complexity. You have to navigate visas, though digital nomad visas and retirement visas are becoming common in countries hungry for foreign capital. You have to navigate taxes, because the United States is one of the few countries that taxes its citizens on worldwide income, regardless of where they live, though the foreign earned income exclusion can mitigate this for active income. You have to deal with being away from family and the culture shock of a new language. But for the FIRE mindset, these are solvable engineering problems, not deal breakers. The math is simply too compelling to ignore. However, there is a psychological trap here. We have spent the last 8 parts of this masterclass focusing on defense. We have talked about cutting expenses, lowering taxes, slashing housing costs, and withdrawing safely. This is the scarcity side of the equation. It is powerful, but it has a mathematical limit. You can only cut your expenses to 0. You cannot cut them below 0. There is no limit, however, on how much you can earn. Defense wins championships, but offense builds dynasties. If you want to retire in 5 years instead of 15, you cannot just save your way there on a $50,000 salary. You need a bigger shovel. You need to pour more fuel into the engine. We need to talk about the hustle. The modern economy has created opportunities for income generation that our parents never could have imagined. We are not talking about driving for Uber or filling out surveys for pennies. We are talking about scalable side hustles. Businesses that you build once and that pay you forever. We are talking about divorcing your time from your income entirely before you even retire. In Part 9, we are going to shift gears aggressively. We are going to break down the income accelerator. I am going to show you the specific business models that early retirees use to double their income without doubling their work hours. We are moving from saving pennies to printing dollars. There is a mathematical ceiling to frugality. You can only cut your budget so much before you hit the bone. You can stop buying lattes, you can move to a cheaper apartment, and you can ride a bicycle to work, but you cannot reduce your spending to 0. At some point, you need to eat. The defensive game has a hard limit. The offensive game, however, is theoretically infinite. There is no law of physics that caps how much money you can earn. And this is where the FIRE movement splits into 2 distinct tribes. The scarcity mindset practitioners who count every penny, and the abundance mindset architects who focus on expanding the gap by exploding their income. If you want to retire in 10 years, saving 50% of a $50,000 salary will get you there. But if you want to retire in 3 years, you do not need a better budget. You need a bigger shovel. You need to decouple your time from your money. Most people are trapped in linear income. This is the W-2 trap. You trade 1 hour of your life for 1 unit of currency. If you want more money, you must trade more hours. But you only have 24 hours in a day. You are capped by time. To accelerate your FIRE journey, you must shift to scalable income, or asymmetric returns. This means building assets that work while you sleep. Let's look at the concept of digital leverage, popularized by thinkers like Naval Ravikant. In the old economy, to build a business, you needed permission. You needed a bank to give you a loan, capital leverage, or you needed to hire employees, labor leverage. Both are risky and expensive. Today, we have permissionless leverage in the form of code and media. You can record a video, write a piece of software, or publish a book once, and it can be consumed by 10 people or 10 million people with 0 extra effort on your part. This is the concept of zero marginal cost of replication. Consider the case study of the knowledge worker. Imagine a human resources manager named Elena. She makes $80,000 a year. She knows everything about resume writing and interview preparation. Path A. She drives for a rideshare app on weekends. She trades her Saturday for $20 an hour. This is a second job, not a scalable hustle. She is just burning herself out for linear dollars. Path B. Elena spends her weekends building a digital product. She writes a comprehensive guide called The Ultimate Resume Template for Tech Jobs. It takes her 100 hours to create. She prices it at $50. Once she uploads that PDF to the internet, her work is done. If she sells one copy, she makes $50. If she sells 1,000 copies, she makes $50,000. She does not have to write the book again. She does not have to ship a box. The internet duplicates her work for free. If Elena sells just 2 copies a day, she is making an extra $36,000 a year. That is a 45% raise. If she invests 100% of that digital income into the S&P 500, she cuts 7 years off her retirement timeline. This is not passive income, in the sense that you do nothing. It is front-loaded effort. You work hard once and you get paid repeatedly. This is the specific type of income that turbocharges the FIRE equation because it scales without requiring more of your time. Another powerful model used by the FIRE community is service arbitrage, or the productized service. Consultants often fall into the trap of billing by the hour. I charge $100 an hour. This is still a job. The FIRE approach is to package that skill into a flat fee product. Instead of consulting, you offer a 2-hour audit. You create a standardized system where you can deliver a specific result in 30 minutes because you have done it 1,000 times. You charge $500 for the value, not the time. If you can deliver $500 of value in 30 minutes, your effective hourly rate is $1,000. You have detached your earnings from the clock. Now let's look at the content asset. This is playing the long game. Case studies abound of software engineers, nurses, and accountants who started simple blogs or YouTube channels documenting their journey. Take the dividend dad. He is an IT professional who started writing articles about his dividend portfolio in 2016. For the first 2 years, he made $0. He was shouting into the void, but he kept building the library of content. By year 4, search engines were sending him 10,000 visitors a month. Through display advertising and affiliate relationships, his blog started generating $2,000 a month. That is $24,000 a year. To generate $24,000 of passive income from a stock portfolio using the 4% rule, you would need $600,000 in cash invested. Think about that. His blog has the same financial power as a $600,000 portfolio, but it cost him $0 to build, only time. This is why content is referred to as digital real estate. You are building property on the internet that pays you rent in the form of attention and ad revenue. When you combine these income accelerators with the geographic arbitrage we discussed in Part 8, the results become absurd. Imagine you take your US remote job earning $100,000. You move to a low-cost country where you live like royalty on $30,000. Your gap is $70,000. Then, you launch a scalable side hustle that brings in an extra $30,000 a year. Your total savings now hit $100,000 annually. With a $100,000 annual contribution to the market starting from zero, assuming a 7% return, you hit $1 million in roughly 7 years. You have compressed a 45-year career into a 7-year sprint. You are retired by age 35. But there is a crucial warning here. As you focus on the hustle, as you become obsessed with the metrics, the sales, the click-through rates, and the net worth spreadsheet, something dangerous begins to happen to your psychology. The pursuit of the number becomes addictive. You start to view every non-money-making activity as a waste of time. You stop hanging out with friends because it doesn't have an ROI. You refuse to take a vacation because that money should be compounding. You turn into a relentless capital accumulation machine. And then one day you log into your brokerage account. You refresh the page, and you see it. The comma, the 2 commas. You have hit your number. You have reached the summit of the mountain you have been climbing for a decade. You are financially independent. You can quit your job tomorrow. You expect fireworks. You expect a sense of euphoria to wash over you. You expect the sky to look bluer. But instead you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel panic. This is the arrival fallacy. It is the dark side of the FIRE movement that nobody talks about in the glossy magazine articles. We spend so much time engineering the finances, optimizing the taxes, and hacking the system that we forget to engineer the human inside the machine. We have spent 9 parts of this masterclass building the how. But if you do not have a rock-solid answer to the why, your early retirement will not be a dream. It will be a depression. You are about to face the 1 more year syndrome, the paralyzing fear that it is not enough, so you keep working just a little longer, and a little longer until you never leave. You are about to face the identity crisis of losing your job title in a society that asks, "What do you do?" within 5 seconds of meeting you. In the final part of this series, Part 10, we are going to confront the endgame. We will discuss the psychological transition, the RE, retire early reality versus the fantasy, and how to ensure that when you finally walk away from the desk, you are running toward a life you love, not just running away from a job you hate. We are going to answer the ultimate question. What happens when the paycheck stops? The day the paycheck stops is not a finish line. It is a cliff edge. For the last decade, your entire nervous system has been calibrated to a specific frequency. Accumulate, optimize, grind. You have derived your sense of safety from the growing number in the spreadsheet. You have derived your sense of purpose from the deadlines, the promotions, and even the stress. Then, you wake up on that first Monday morning of freedom. The alarm does not ring. The sun comes up. You have your coffee. You look at your calendar, and it is terrifyingly white. There is no meeting to attend. There is no boss to please. There is no deposit hitting your bank account. For the first time in your adult life, you are burning fuel without refilling the tank. This is the moment where the arrival fallacy strikes with devastating precision. Positive psychology expert Tal Ben-Shahar defines this as the delusion that once we make it, then we will be happy. We convince ourselves that the stress, the long commute, and the office politics are the only things standing between us and bliss. We think that if we remove the negative, the positive will automatically fill the space. But happiness is not the absence of misery. Happiness is the presence of meaning. And the stock market cannot provide meaning. Case studies from the early retirement community reveal a startling trend. A significant percentage of people who achieve FIRE return to work within 18 months. They do not go back because they ran out of money. They go back because they ran out of purpose. They suffered from the void. Without the external structure of a job, you are forced to build your own internal structure. If you do not have a plan for your time, entropy takes over. You end up scrolling social media for 6 hours a day, watching Netflix until your eyes hurt, and feeling a profound sense of isolation. You realize that while you were busy saving 50% of your income, your friends were busy building careers and families. They are at work on Tuesday at 11 a.m. You are alone. This leads to the crisis of identity. In American culture, the first question a stranger asks you at a party is, "What do you do?" For 20 years you had a ready answer. "I am an engineer. I am a director. I am a physician." That label gave you status. It gave you a tribe. When you strip that away, you are left with just you. If you have not done the work to define who you are outside of your economic productivity, this question will humiliate you. You will feel small. This is why we see one more year syndrome. OMY. OMY is the addiction to safety. It happens when you hit your FIRE number, say $2 million, and you look at the spreadsheet and you say, well, what if the market crashes? What if inflation hits 10%? I should just work one more year to get to 2.2 million. Then I'll be safe. A year passes. You have 2.3 million. You say, well, maybe I want to pay for a wedding for my future grandkids. One more year. This is a trap. It is a failure of risk management. You are accurately assessing the risk of running out of money, which, as we proved with the Trinity study in flexible spending, is low, but you are failing to assess the risk of running out of time. Every year you stay in a job you tolerate to add money you do not need is a year of freedom you have voluntarily incinerated. You are trading a scarce resource, your remaining healthy years, for an abundant resource, fiat currency. The math says you are rich, but your actions say you are poor. To escape this trap, you must shift your framework from retiring from to retiring to. Retiring from is running away. It is an avoidance strategy. You hate your boss, you hate the traffic, you hate the alarm clock. This motivation is powerful enough to get you to the finish line, but it is not powerful enough to sustain you for 40 years after you cross it. Retiring to is a pull strategy. You need a vision of your future life that is so compelling it pulls you out of the office. This requires you to design your perfect Tuesday, not your perfect vacation. Anyone can sit on a beach for a week, but a random rainy Tuesday in November. What do? Successful early retirees replace the work pillars with life pillars. Pillar 1, work. Yes, work. Humans are designed to solve problems. We need mastery. This is why so many FIRE adherents don't actually stop working. They stop working for money. They start nonprofits. They learn to code for fun. They build furniture. They write books. They engage in autotelic activities, work that is done for its own sake, not for a reward. Pillar 2, connection. The workplace provides built-in socialization. When you leave, you must aggressively engineer community. You have to join the running club, the board game group, the volunteer organization. You have to schedule lunch with friends like it is a board meeting. Loneliness is as statistically deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Your portfolio can survive a 4% withdrawal rate, but your psyche cannot survive 0% human connection. Pillar 3: Health. This is the ultimate asset. We spent this entire series talking about compounding capital, but health compounds too. If you spend your first 40 years sacrificing your health to get wealth, you will spend your last 40 years spending your wealth to regain your health. Early retirement gives you the time to cook real food, to sleep 8 hours, to move your body every single day. This brings us to the final and perhaps most controversial realization of the masterclass. The FIRE movement is not actually about retiring early. Retire early is a marketing slogan. It is the hook. But the reality is about financial independence. FI. The RE is optional. When you reach financial independence, the power dynamic of your life flips. You are no longer an indentured servant to your lifestyle. You possess the ultimate superpower. The ability to say no. You can say no to a toxic boss. You can say no to a project that violates your ethics. You can say no to working weekends. And ironically, when you have the power to say no, you might find that you actually enjoy working. Many people hit their FIRE number and keep their jobs, but the stress evaporates. Why? Because they know they can walk away at any moment. The have to becomes a get to. So, if you have watched this entire 10-part series, you now possess the operating system. You understand the math of the gap. You understand the engine of index funds. You understand the safety of the 4% rule. You understand the defense of the bond tent. You understand the loophole of the Roth ladder. You understand the hack of geographic arbitrage. You understand the scale of the side hustle. But knowledge is only potential power. Execution is real power. The spreadsheet will not fill itself. The expenses will not cut themselves. The investments will not buy themselves. The standard American path is a river that flows in one direction, toward debt, consumption, and lifelong labor. To do this, you have to swim upstream. People will call you crazy. They will say you are depriving yourself. They will say it is impossible. Let them talk. While they are financing cars they cannot afford to impress people they do not like, you are buying your freedom. The journey to financial independence is the hardest thing you will ever do for money, but it is the best thing you will ever do for your life. Do not wait for the perfect market conditions. Do not wait for the perfect salary. The best time to plant the tree of your liberty was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Close the spreadsheet. Open your life. Welcome to the movement.